This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. While negotiations are ongoing, there doesn't appear to be an immediate end in sight for the war in Ukraine. In spite of the efforts by the likes of Macron, Biden, and the wider global community, Vladimir Putin has not called off the invasion. And given that the Ukrainian military forces and civilians are putting up a much stronger fight than anyone expected, this might not end anytime soon. With a protracted conflict on the cards, talk has turned to Putin's trick up his sleeve that could end the war in a heartbeat and secure Russian victory: the nuclear option. Although many view such an escalation as thankfully improbable, it nevertheless raises the question as to how the conflict has escalated so dramatically and so quickly up until this point, and whether it could escalate further. So in this video, we're going to dissect just that: the 16 steps to all-out escalation. Before we start though, currently only about a quarter of you are subscribed to the channel. So if you don't want to miss anything during this really important and difficult time, then be sure to subscribe. We appreciate your support. There are a number of models which look at escalations like this one. But for our purposes, we're going to be taking a look at Herman Kahn's 16-rung escalation ladder, which ranges from sub-crisis disagreement through show of force to controlled local war to the aftermath of an all-out war. As Kahn himself writes, roughly the higher one is on the ladder, the more intense the dispute, and the closer one is likely to feel to large-scale violence. And crucially, many of the rungs can be skipped on this process. So first things first, let's actually get ourselves established on the ladder and go through how we got here, starting from the bottom on the first rung. The first rung on the ladder, titled Sub-Crisis Disagreement, is fairly mundane, referring simply to a difference of opinion, one where they may still be polite to one another, but one that could escalate into a full crisis. For Russia's invasion of Ukraine, this disagreement can ultimately be traced back to the fall of the Soviet Union, i.e. a disagreement about where to draw the lines of Ukraine's territory. Initially, that disagreement was peaceful. It was a matter of politics, of drawing borders either here or there. But that disagreement began to bubble under the surface until finally bursting out as a crisis, the second rung on our ladder. The crisis rung comes with a newfound sense of urgency. Specifically, unless some issue is resolved in the immediate future, under a crisis, both sides believe that more rungs of the escalation ladder will be climbed. For the war in Ukraine, that crisis level was achieved in the aftermath of the revolution that ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych in February of 2014. That revolution very quickly led to a major escalation, the annexation of Crimea by Russia, immediately causing us to jump several rungs up the ladder to rung 7, limited military confrontations. On rung 7, one or both sides may go into a combat alert status. Forces may be dispersed, leaves cancelled, and preventative and routine maintenance halted. The Russian annexation of Crimea was certainly incredibly limited in its scope. It didn't represent a full-blown intense crisis, rung 8, or even a local war, rungs 12 and 13. And no one at the time believed that an escalation of the nuclear form was even on the cards. After the annexation of Crimea in 2014, we can climb down the ladder to rung 3, political, diplomatic, and economic gestures. That's because following the annexation, neither side really began to ramp up the military dimension of this dispute. From an international point of view, the likes of Canada, the US, and the European Union imposed significant sanctions on a number of Russian and Crimean officials, but not much more immediately happened. That didn't last forever though, with the dispute really taking an escalatory turn during 2021, when Russia began amassing thousands of troops and military equipment near the Ukrainian border, causing the situation to jump up to rung 8, intense crisis. As Russian forces began to gather on Ukraine's borders, a number of world leaders called on Putin to de-escalate the situation and withdraw troops. Yet the situation remained a tinderbox, and as Kahn himself highlights, at this stage it's possible that the exertion of pressure has simply provoked countermeasures. This ultimately culminated in Putin making a calculation to make a big jump up the ladder in order to solve his issue. The Russians hoped that this leap would take them to rung 11, spectacular show of force, but it didn't exactly go as planned. Russia had expected that their invasion of Ukraine would be swift, and that they'd be able to, in a spectacular show of force, waltz into Ukraine and take it over with little resistance. And boy, were they wrong. With fighting now approaching a month, that spectacular show of force never really materialized. Rather, Putin somewhat overshot, and we're now in a controlled local war, rung 12. And depending how you look at it, we might even be on rung 14. Complete evacuation. Under complete evacuation, one is on the verge of, or actually in a war, with each side, if at all possible, likely to evacuate its cities and likely to declare martial law. Now, this is half true. Ukraine did declare martial law and has begun the evacuation of cities. Russia, however, has obviously not. Regardless, you can see that we're at best 2 or 3 rungs away from some sort of all-out war, rung 15. And at worst, we're on the very edge of this. So where do we go from here? Well, none of us are military experts or able to read Putin's mind, but we can already see from both Putin's actions and the global response, the ladder model is being leveraged as envisioned. Specifically, the threat of greater escalation, rungs 15 and 16, a nuclear escalation, is being used to try and get a de-escalation. Toward the very end of February, Putin ordered that Russia's nuclear deterrence forces be put on high alert, a move designed to ratchet up the pressure on Ukraine, and by extension the West, in an attempt that they would back down. This doesn't seem to have immediately worked, so Putin could attempt another spectacular show of force, back down on rung 11, in the form of a limited nuclear strike. But given that we're on rung 14, it isn't likely to help matters, and would likely only provoke some sort of all-out war, rung 15, potentially a nuclear war. That being said, the prospect of an all-out nuclear war, while theoretically possible, remains highly improbable. Under the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, neither side, NATO nor Russia, has any logical incentive to launch a nuclear attack. It seems then that things may not escalate this far, but it's certainly worrying how far we've come, and how many rungs have already been climbed. Time will tell as to whether we'll actually end up going any higher. Hopefully we don't. But the probability of any of these things happening felt low not that long ago, so it's hard to predict. If probability and predictions aren't your thing, you should check out Brilliant. Brilliant is an online STEM learning platform that turns complex subjects into fun and interactive experiences. I actually did a computer science degree, and I've loved exploring Brilliant to refresh my skills, as well as learning new ones to help with my current job, like their superb statistics courses. But you don't need any kind of background in STEM. If you just want to spend a bit of time building your skills, then you can do it right away, with no long boring lectures like the ones I had to sit through. Sorry to my former university. Instead, you can learn through interactive games and puzzles, the kind of thing you actually want to do. There's something at all levels too, with more advanced courses on things like neural networks and even quantum computing. Just pick a course that you're interested in and get started. They're all designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning, so you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. Brilliant helps you learn new things and sharpen your skills. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you should sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDR EU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks so much for supporting the channel.